Hey, Super Legends, you're tuned in to episode 2 of Sales Superstars. Oh, so excited. My name's Dre and I help sales professionals get into their ideal job in a double quick time. So what does that mean? That means right now. I even help people that are not in sales, but maybe they're in a different industry. I can help you too. Anyway, so really excited about this next episode. My guest is Olivia Powell, and the reason why I got her on, so like 1, is she's got a really inspiring story. 2, she's selling from her podcast, which not very many people that I know are doing that. And 3, I've actually got another podcast, so I want to learn all the different ways that you can make money and sell from your podcast. So without any further ado, a massive, huge welcome to Olivia Powell. How are you, Olivia?
I'm fantastic. How are you, Dre?
Oh, yeah, I'm so excited. I'm really so excited for this show and for you to come on and be able to share how to sell from your podcast. So I think that's going to be so valuable. I'm going to be a little bit selfish, like for me, but for so many other, business leaders, sales professionals, entrepreneurs as well. So
yeah, go for it. Pick my brains, be as selfish as you want. I'm here to help, anyone I can. So
brilliant. All right, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, about your career journey?
Sure. So I am a podcast coach and consultant. I'm also a certified life coach. So I first got into business quite a few years ago now, through network marketing, and it was really great. And I learned a lot about sales through there. So I've got a background of being a registered nurse and a registered midwife. So I'm a healthcare professional. However, in that, you don't really deal with sales as such. Like you can, sell people into doing certain things to help them with their health, but I'm not actually exchanging, money through my own means, if that makes sense. So when I went into network marketing or direct selling, it was a whole new kettle of fish for me, a whole new set of skills. And that was basically what kind of set the foundation of my learning about sales pretty much. Back then, it's a bit of a controversial topic, I guess. There's some good, network marketing has got like a good name and a bad name at the same time through their means of selling, I guess you'd say. So I learned the hard way through that. And then I realized that business of selling makeup and skincare was a great passion, but it wasn't really a purpose. And that's when I shut down the business. And then I became a certified life coach through, it's a long story, but I became actually a relationship coach. So I was helping people, specifically women and couples, up level their relationships, get out of toxic, narcissistic relationships and help them with dating and all this sort of stuff. So I did that for about 12 months. As much as I loved that, I was feeling really drawn to business and entrepreneurialism. So I went into business coaching, and long story short, I realized, whoa, I'm like one tiny little dot in the massive cog of what makes up business owners. And I didn't really have a niche. And that's when I moved into podcast coaching, because I actually started my podcast before my businesses, and I've had some success through it and absolutely love it. And it's a major passion and a purpose of mine. And because of that, I've made a profit. So I just would like to share with other people how they can do the same for themselves and what kind of benefits they can basically gain, for their own businesses or their own sales and all that sort of jazz. So, yeah.
Love that. All right. So how and why did you start your podcast? So if you started it before your business coaching, tell me a bit more about that.
Yeah. So basically, it's a bit of a long story, but I'll try to keep it short. But I was engaged to someone that was quite toxic for me, which I didn't realize at the time until it all ended. And I realized, whoa, he was actually very narcissistic and I was quite codependent and it was really unhealthy. And we both went through a lot of issues with that. And when I came out of it, I didn't really know who I was. And so I spent a good maybe 1 to 2 years trying to figure out who I was. Do you know what I mean? Because I'd made this relationship like the center of my world pretty much and lost myself through that. And so when that ended, I was like, who the frick is Olivia Powell? What do I enjoy? What makes me me? Like I actually felt like I lost a lot of, I guess, those ideals and values and all that sort of stuff. So that kind of set me on my personal development journey, I guess you'd say. And that's when I signed up to network marketing, because I was trying to find something that trying to figure out what my passion was and why I was here and who I was outside of a relationship, because I'd been in relationships, all my life from a really young age, right? And then through that, I was learning about narcissism and codependency and more about relationships, because I didn't grow up with great models for relationships, and I grew up in the church system, and it's a very skewed way of viewing relationships, with the woman having to obey and the man ruling and all these things. So I had a lot of stuff to work through. And over those couple of years, I learned so much and basically went through like this spiritual transformation without getting too woo-woo for everyone on here. And I realized by the end of it, I've been through so much, I can't possibly keep all this contained just to myself. And I knew that I needed to help other people out there with what I had been through, because I knew that I wasn't the only one. I couldn't possibly be the only one. And so I just realized I needed a platform to kind of share that message. And I actually started out on YouTube, which is great. You know, there's so many people on YouTube. There's lots of YouTubers. It's one of the biggest search engines in the world. But what I found was it was really quite draining for me, having to set up my room and a camera and have makeup on and my hair freshly washed and try to, you know, get the filming when it was at the lightest in the morning, you know, and it just became a lot of work. And I got to the point where I was like, is my message even worth sharing if it means all this trouble? Do you know what I mean? And the answer was yes, but the way that I was going about it didn't really work for me in my lifestyle and even my personality, because I am a bit of an extroverted introvert. You know, I don't love being on camera all day, every day. I like doing it here and there. Like even yesterday, I said to my audience, I was like, you know, I'm promoting my upcoming offer. And I was like, I just don't feel like getting on camera today, guys. So I'm just writing a post about this, you know. So I'm more that way inclined. And so I thought, okay. And, you know, podcasts had helped me for years, you know, actually get the guts to start my own business. Do you know what I mean? To understand things about being an entrepreneur and how that's a different mindset from being an employee, and how to be a leader in your own life and a high quality woman and all these things, right? That helped me basically develop into who I am now. And I thought, why don't I start a podcast? I'm like, that seems so much easier. You know, I don't have to show my face for the whole thing. I can if I choose to, you know, I can edit things out if I muck up, you know, it's just easier in terms of having to not go back to like, you know, editing the video and trying to get things said the right way and look the right way when you say them and all this. And I just realized, yeah, podcasting could be a great option for me and really sustainable. And then I started it. And I really loved it, and I've continued it ever since. So that's kind of why that all happened.
And you're absolutely killing it. So I've seen everything on like social media, and yeah, like massive congratulations.
Thank you. That's really sweet.
Yeah. So say for instance, if there's someone that's watching or listening and they're thinking, oh, you know, I've got a great idea. I'd love to start a podcast. You know, where, you know, like how would they get started? What's the best way?
Yeah, so there's actually 3 ways you can do this. So the first way is you can do it all yourself. So spend lots of time on YouTube looking at the different ways that you can do it, because there's not just one way, but ultimately, for the most part, I recommend going through iTunes. So submitting your podcast to iTunes. But before you do that, there's a bit of pre-work. You know, you can't just apply for a podcast and then have it up and running. You've actually got to have at least one episode there ready to be uploaded, ready to go. Otherwise iTunes, well, you can't actually apply technically. It will never get approved. So the best way is to figure out who your niche is, who you're speaking to, who you're selling to, I guess, essentially, because that's your audience. And then creating your content from there, you know, your podcast content, and then also producing, and this is optional, an intro and an outro. So not every podcaster does this. There's no rules, which I love about podcasting, right? Bit of a rebel, bit of a rule breaker. I hate being told what I have to do and can and can't do. So, that's one of the benefits of podcasting, but essentially you can have an intro that tells your listeners, you know, what the podcast is about, what you're about, what you can help them with, you know, the benefits of actually listening to your podcast. And then you've got an outro where you can direct them on further to working with you or purchasing off you or buying or investing and all that jazz. And then once you've got that, you in a show title that hasn't been taken by another podcast, and you can just do that by easily Googling that to find out. Then you apply to iTunes, and within 1 to 2 weeks, you get a notification saying that it's been approved or not. There are certain specifications, like, you know, the cover art being to the right, you know, specifications and a few bits and pieces. But once that's done, you only have to do it once, it's done forever. And then you can start producing regular content if you choose to. So that's the first way, doing it all yourself, which can be time intensive. That's what I did. I spent literally like, it was like 30 or 40 hours, sorry, not years. I look good if that's the case, on YouTube. And there was so much conflicting information. I was like getting a real headache by the end of it. But it happened in the end, thank goodness. The second way is having someone help you, guide you through the process and give you different options, and then you choose which one's best for you. That's a little bit easier. or alternatively, you can pay someone to set it up for you. So if you're a busy business owner, a busy entrepreneur, you're in sales all the time, you don't have time to put all this together, you can pay someone to do it for you, which can be a great option as well.
Yeah, do you know what? It is really time consuming. So I edit like the audio, the video, and like it's funny. Like, so most nights, I think this week I've released a couple of episodes on my other podcast, and I'm like there trying to like edit. So I'll edit on my phone, and I'm trying to like keep my eyes open and edit. Yeah, it's just really difficult.
Oh, you're dedicated. I love that you've got two now. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, thank you.
A lot of extra work, but it'll be worth it.
Yeah, but I wish, hopefully soon I'll be able to pay someone just to do like all of the groundwork.
Yes.
So, can you tell us a little bit about, so you've, how long have you been doing podcasting now? So is it about 15, 16 months?
It will be 2 years next month. Actually, next week. It'll be 2 years. My podcast will be turning 2. So excited.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
And I feel that you've started, early? Would you say that you started early compared to like most people?
So podcasting has been around for approximately 10 years. There are certain dates, I just can't recall them off the top of my head. So it's not new as such, but it's only now really starting to gain like a lot of recognition. It's starting to trend, it's starting to get hot. A lot of people now, especially business owners as well, as having a podcast in addition to their business or as an extension of that. Which is wonderful. Do you know what I mean? There's 1 million registered podcasts worldwide, which sounds like a lot, but when you think about it, with the billions of people on earth, that's really a drop in the ocean. So it has a long way to go. I still believe that podcasting is massively in its infancy. I honestly, truly believe that it's going to like blow up like YouTube one day. So it's kind of, I personally think it's good to jump on the bandwagon now. It's not too late to start a podcast. I know some people are kind of like, oh, it's been around for a while. Am I too late? Is it going to get oversaturated like YouTube? But I really believe that if you get in there early and you build it, it can lead to amazing things. And if you think about Facebook, a lot of investors regretted not jumping on that bandwagon when it first was taking off and making squillions because they didn't think it was going to be a thing. Whereas I personally think it's a thing now, but it's going to be a major thing because, as the world returns to the new normal after the pandemic, people are going to be returning to workplaces, or, their focus is going to be less on the pandemic and economics and whatnot and returning to life to some degree. So a lot of millennials consume a lot of content on the way to work, commuting through trains, buses, all that sort of jazz, at the gym, listening to podcasts, going on walks and exercising. So it's a really consumable, easy way to listen. And also I should mention too, seeing as this is a podcast for people that sell, Edison Research actually does stipulate certain statistics, and they say that podcasters are one of the biggest groups of people that will actually buy off a podcast host. So usually, it's a huge portion of the population that will actually purchase off a podcast host. So if a podcast host, advertises a digital product or a physical product or something like that, most of the listeners are more likely to go purchase that and follow them on social media, to go to their website, to, go to their cart, to check out, whatever. Which is amazing, because I know for me, and they're also a massively educated population as well. They're interested in self-development and learning and bettering themselves and bettering their lives. So that's like the perfect pool of people you want to be targeting. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So can you share some of the ways that people can sell from their podcasts? So for me, I never really thought about, selling from my podcast. I have thought about, maybe getting sponsorship when my viewers and the audience numbers rise, but as we were talking before, and you said there's 8 different ways that you can.
So there's 8 different ways you can sell through a podcast. I've just got them written here. So I'll go into more detail after I mention these 8 of how you can actually monetize. So the first way is you can actually advertise physical products through your podcast. Whether you sell, it could be anything. Do you know what I mean? It could be like a type of coffee or a pre-workout drink, or, some sort of piece of clothing or whatever, right? Especially now with the pandemic, you want to be thinking about what it is that you're selling as well. I know that there were certain groups of a lot of homeware stuff was sold a lot throughout the pandemic. Do you know what I mean? Because people were stuck at home wanting something to do. So gardening and things at Bunnings and all this sort of stuff really went off the shelves, which is great. So you can sell physical products, you can sell other people's physical products by being an affiliate, or even, you know, non-physical products such as digital products and services, which is great. You can also advertise your own coaching, consulting or practitioner services through your podcast. You can also gain sponsorships and investors. So I've got a client at the moment who she's in health promotion, and her hospital that she was working at actually invested in her podcast and was paying for all the running costs of that. So editing and all this stuff, which is amazing. So you can have angel investors as well. Yeah, that's an option. That's an option people most likely don't really think about. It's probably like the least thought about option in terms of monetizing. But yeah, so, you know, if you work for an organization or a bigger company, you can ask for them to maybe foot the bill with that. But you can also run podcasts for free, mind you. So I don't want people to think you have to pay to run one. There's also donations. So I remember when I was vegan for a short period of time there, I was tuning into these vegan podcasts for motivation, you know, because it can be so hard, I found, to try and stay a vegan. And this one podcast called Food for Thought, shout out to her, she's great. She actually, it was her audience that begged her to start her podcast, and they all donated money for her to start one because they were so desperate to hear from her and have her education and knowledge and expertise. So her following, literally pays for her podcast and the running costs, which is unbelievable. Well, it's believable, but I just think it's incredible. And there's also affiliate. You know, if you're like an affiliate, you sell other people's programs or products, you know, you can even get promo codes and share them on your podcast. There's lots of options with that. Being paid for interviews. So I'm interviewing a woman called Rosie Reese tomorrow, and she charges to be interviewed, and she makes good money like that because she does like 3 podcast interviews a day, sometimes a couple of times a week. Right. So, and that's a couple of $100 each episode. So, and she's very high profile and very successful in her area. So she's actually monetizing her podcast that way by now charging for her time, right? Time is money.
Yeah, time is money. Yeah.
Very smart. But you've got to, you know, I really recommend either being, if you're a celebrity, doing that, or if you're very time poor and you're in high demand, then you can start doing that. I don't recommend doing that, you know, in the first maybe 5 years of your podcast, unless you already have that huge following. Yeah, I'm not quite there yet, guys. I'm working on it.
Me neither.
Yeah, you might be a brand ambassador. Yeah, so you can, you know, liaise and hook up with those people and, you know, produce a podcast and advertise that way.
Like that one.
Yeah. And you can also be hired for speaking gigs. So you can, if you're a speaker or just a podcaster in general, you can actually, you know, be hired to talk on panels or stages and all that sort of stuff. And it's kind of like, I think of your podcast as like an audio resume, so that people can get to know your vibe and how you speak. And if they, you know, like your vibes or whatnot, then they can hire you and go, yeah, I love, you know, Dre's energy. I'm going to have him, you know, talk about sales at this upcoming speakeasy or, you know, Speaker September or gig next in 2021 or something like that, right? So yeah, there's actually 10 ways I've mentioned, but there's a few different ideas.
I love that. All right, so that leads me on to my next question. In your opinion, what makes a good podcast or a great podcast, an outstanding podcast?
Oh, that's a really good question. So I think, so the first one is relatability and vulnerability. So no one wants to sit down and listen to a podcast that's really super freaking dry and you're like, oh my God, this person's so boring. You know, there's no humor, there's no energy. They're drony. Do you know what I mean? So energy is so important. And I say energy being the most important one because if someone's got good energy, you're probably going to listen because, you know, it rubs off on you. Like you can actually sense the energy and you might feel a little bit more like, oh, do you know what I mean? Especially if they're humorous. So you're like, oh, what are they going to say next? Do you know what I mean? Compared to someone that's really low vibe and boring and not entertaining. Do you know what I mean? Like you're less likely to be engaged by that.
There's a lot of them out there. I've listened to podcasts where they're just really dry.
Yes, so dry. Yeah, I totally agree. So use different tonality. Have a laugh. Like I laugh on my podcast. I talk into it like I'm talking to a friend. Do you know what I mean? Because if I get too serious about it, I could become one of those drones and I don't want to be like that. You know what I mean? So especially if you're doing interviews, it's a lot easier to have that bouncing back and forth sort of energy, but you can bring that yourself. So I think energy is huge, and that's very important in sales as well, which you can talk about in a second. I talk about the 3 E's. So the first thing is it should be educational to some degree, in my opinion, because people are rocking up to listen to your stuff. They're giving you part of their life. So you want to teach them something valuable. Yeah. Like, you're not going to listen in on something if you're not getting anything from it. Right. So share something like the 4 tips to sales, or, you know, whatever, the 5 different platforms you should be selling from, you know, and infuse a bit of entertainment, which is what I was talking about with humor. So that's the second E. So entertaining, educational, and the third one I really love, which is empowering. So you want to be empowering your audience to take the next step with you, or to make a positive change in their life, or, you know, invest in that program so they can get X result. You know, empower them so that they want to come back and listen for more. Empower them so that they actually can take action on that thing. Or even, you know, empower them to take more self-responsibility. You know, like if they're a business owner and they want to invest in this, empower them to do that, you know, because it's fear that's going to hold them back from actually purchasing, investing, you know, following you on the other social media channels and whatnot. So the 3 E's are a good starting point. The other thing I would recommend as well is like the logical versus emotional brain. Right. So a lot of podcasters can be very swayed one extreme to the other. So I've listened to some podcasts that are very logical and it talks very well to the logical mind and it makes sense, but I don't feel emotionally connected to that person. I'm just like, yeah, they've got good content. Do you know what I mean? Which is still great, but I'm not kind of like, oh, I love that person. I want to, you know, rock up and just listen to them. I just want to learn from them. Yeah. So when you talk to the emotions as well, like that fear of selling, or the scarcity mindset and what that looks like, or, you know, how it can play out in their lives. You know, for example, if I think about, you know, when I sold Podcast Launch Queens, I didn't just talk about strategy. I talked about mindset and how they would feel once their podcast was up and running, being proud of themselves, that they took the leap. You know, they weren't procrastinating for another whole 12 months and then regretting it later and kicking themselves for it, or missing out on potential, you know, attracting clients to their podcast and, you know, talking to cool people like, you know, we are, which is great. Do you know what I mean? So having that balance of logical and emotional. And what I find, without stereotyping, a lot of guys can be really great at the logical, but if they want to talk to that well-rounded, holistic, you know, sort of aspect, bring in the emotional. It's definitely going to draw the females in as well. And for some female podcasters, they're all about the emotion, but for you to be really holistic and, you know, hook people in and make them wanting to come back for more, you need to sometimes bring in a bit of the logic and actually show them how that's going to positively impact and influence them in some way.
Awesome. Right. So can you tell us about your program that you offer?
Yeah, sure. So Podcast Launch Queens. So that's my signature program at the moment. I haven't announced it yet, but I'm relaunching it in January next year. So you guys are getting the first dibs on that. So that's pretty cool. So Podcast Launch Queens is a program that I decided to create because I guess for me, when I was back at 2018 trying to formulate my podcast, it felt like really hard work. And I know a lot of content has been created from then till now about how to help people start their podcast. But back then when I was trying to put it together, like there's a lot of unclear information and it just kind of led me around in circles. And I just remember getting really frustrated. Like I'm very D energy. I'm like, let's get the job done. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes so I'm like, why is this so hard? I don't want to spend hours doing this. I just want to have it up and running already, you know? Yeah. And yeah. And so I was like, I just want to help facilitate others to actually start their podcast and have a voice and speak their truth and share their message. And the easiest way to do that was either I create it for them, which as a business owner and as a previous business coach, there's more to it than just starting the podcast. There's podcast branding, there's marketing and promoting, social media marketing, you know, there's identifying your ideal listener or your ideal avatar. What are their pain points, their pleasure points, you know, how to interview someone, because back then I'd never interviewed anyone in my life. I learned on the fly and trial and error and researching online how to sharpen my skills up and whatnot. So I kind of wanted to put all that information in one place so that people can just do this 8-week program, know all the basics and foundations and set them up for long-term success. And then next year at some stage, I'm planning on actually helping existing podcasters to up-level their podcast, which is coming later. So don't get too invested in that yet. But yeah.
So I'm taking it's for at the moment. So in January, it's only for women, but later on during the year, then it will open up.
No, it's for men and women. Yeah, it's for men and women. So with my marketing, it's quite feminine, right? I have some guys that are attracted to it, but I'm not very like your marketing, Dre, is great, and it's very masculine as well. Like there's fire to it, it's passionate, it's boom, boom, boom. You know what I mean? Like it's really, really great. I'm much more like feminine, flowy. Do you know what I mean? Like it's still got that strength to it, but it's very soft with the pinks and all that. So naturally, it just kind of attracts more women to me. But definitely open to men as well. There's no like you can't join because you're a man, any of that crap. No, not at all.
Okay. I'm so glad that you said that mine is very sort of like masculine, because I haven't really considered that properly. So that's something that I'm gonna definitely take on board.
It's very strong and vibrant. Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
All right. So we were talking about Tony Robbins like earlier. So you've been to a few UPW events.
I have.
So tell me about some of like your mentors or coaches or people that have like inspired you.
Yeah. Oh God, there's so many. I'm just sitting here and I'm like, how do I pick? Do you know what I mean? Like there's just it's so hard to pinpoint just one, but talking about Tony, he was definitely one of the first ones. All these years ago when I was stuck in this full-time job that I was really unhappy in, and I was on a mining site doing health medicals from a van. It was very isolating. It was extreme weather. And it was like 4 hours commuting every day to get back and forth, to work and whatnot. So I had a lot of time to rack up listening to audiobooks and podcasts and Tony Robbins YouTube videos and all this. So he has to, that there's credit there. He's really helped kind of light the flame, I guess, to get things happening for me. So I owe a lot to Tony. I love that man. He's definitely been a game changer for me personally. But also other people. And once again, I bring it back to podcasts because that's where a lot of, the changes started to happen for me, was when I started to engage in like high quality content, to actually help myself get over the line and actually really take action, not to sit there and wish and dream about stuff to happen for me. So I've got to give out a shout out to Cara Elwill from America. Her podcast is called Style Your Mind. She was the #1 podcast I listened to, the very first one. And she was also a life coach. So she inspired, I owe a lot to her too, and she doesn't even know who I am, but I owe a lot to her because, her podcast was the one that actually planted the seed, like, oh, wow, maybe I could do a podcast. And then like, oh shit, what's a life coach? Maybe I could do that, and it started that whole trajectory. Yeah. And then on top of that, once again, these are all podcasters that I don't know personally, like haven't met them, but Angie Lee was a big one as well. She's got a podcast called The Angie Lee Show. She's all about Instagram marketing. She makes learning fun, which is really important for me. No one wants to sit there and listen to dry, boring people. You want to, beef it up a little bit, make it like zhuzh it up and make it engaging. It's so important. Yeah, a little zhuzh, So I've learned a lot from her, and this is what I love too. It's like it's all free. You don't have to pay for a podcast to listen to it. Anyone can access it from anywhere, and they've touched my lives without even knowing. Do you know what I mean? And I wouldn't be here talking to you now if it wasn't for their content out there, and that's just the power of podcasting, I guess. But yeah, I could go on. There's more. I don't know how much you want to hear though.
All right, so if people wanted to get hold of you, what's like the best way for them to contact you to get more information from you?
I'd probably say Facebook, so they can send me a message on Facebook. Friend requests, I don't know if you get this a lot, but you get quite a few of them and then you don't really know who they are. So it's like, I think a message is always best because then you're in my awareness then. Connect through Facebook. I've also got a Facebook group. If, people are too scared to reach out to me, I don't bite, so don't worry, guys. But you can go to that. Yeah. Yeah, we're pretty friendly, I think, and approachable. But yeah, that's called Become a Podcast Queen, the community. There are men in there too, just letting you guys know, not sexist. And Instagram is Become a Podcast Queen. So you can I just say direct message or join the group, to be honest with you.
Yeah, brilliant. So I'm a bit conscious of time, so I know you're very busy. So just a couple more questions. Can you, because I was watching one of your stories earlier on today, and you were talking about audiograms. So yes. I've never used an audiogram, even though I've heard of it before. Can you tell us a little bit, because they're pretty cool.
Yeah, they're game changers. So I actually just had an episode 40 coming out. It's come out today, I think, which actually talks about what they are and how to create them. But I'll give it to you guys now while I'm here. So you've already had some success, Dre, like with your downloaders and listeners on your other podcast. But I feel like an audiogram will just excel that so much more as well. Because what an audiogram is, if you think about the full podcast episode, you've got the intro, you've got the content, which is where all the gold nuggets are for your listeners. And then the outro, an audiogram, I want you to think of it as like the trailer to a blockbuster movie. So it's like a little snippet, gives you a little bit of information, it hooks you in, it says, hey, this is awesome, come watch the full movie, you're going to love it. And that's what an audiogram is for a podcast episode. So it's a 60-second little snippet of the juiciest part of your podcast, whatever you choose it to be. And you can have a graphic there, so it caters to your visual learners online. I always recommend having captions or subtitles, because digital marketers will say that, people are, without sounding awful, hopping onto the toilet and having a quick little scroll on Facebook or Instagram without listening because they don't want to get caught out, or in the kitchen, the lunchroom with their co-workers. If they work for someone else, they don't want to dominate the whole, break room by listening to their online stuff. So they like to read the captions. So that also caters to your visual learners. And if you've got the audio component of that, it caters to your auditory learners. And you want to choose a part in your podcast that is super high value as well. Not just kind of like, meh, whatever. You want to really, have them wanting more, salivating and bubbling at the mouth to be like, what was Dre going to tell us? Like, he's left us on a cliffhanger, also when that piques their interest to go download the full episode. Yeah. And that can be shared on social media. And that's honestly how I've built my podcast, I think, apart from interviewing some high profile people. Yeah, totally. Without audiograms, I would not be where I am now. Like, which is over 16,000 downloads now. There's no way that I would be where I am now without them. And you can do them for free. You can, upgrade and get premium. I highly recommend every podcaster uses them on their social media, on their Facebook stories, their Facebook feed, their Instagram stories, their Instagram feed, wherever you are online, share that thing. Because it's like a taste. It's like it's like the taste tester to like the wedding cake. It's like, oh, I like that one, I'm going to go buy that cake. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's giving them a little bit. Yeah.
So I've just thought of another question. So
go for it.
I've spoken to a few people. So, like with public speaking,
yes.
Actually, that reminds me of something else. You put a great post out a couple of weeks ago. Is a podcaster a public speaker, if they're like the same thing?
Oh, yeah, that was there was lots of mixed answers to that.
So my question is, I feel that there's quite a lot of people out there that want to start a podcast, but they're scared to, because they're worried that people might not tune in, or just that fear.
Totally.
So do you have any advice for people to get going?
I absolutely do. Actually, I love that you brought that up, Dre, because, a lot of podcasters and all this focus so much on just the strategy and the technical stuff. But at the end of the day, that means jack squat if they don't have that determination and resourcefulness and, confidence to go out there and actually make it happen. 80% is psychology and 20% really is just mechanics, So, so yes, there's so many fears that pop up. And for me personally, I worked through about 6 months or so of it before I even started my podcast. Like, I literally, all this confidence stuff to work through, because I was not only scared of judgment from my friends, family, colleagues, everyone and anyone. I was scared of saying the wrong thing and pissing people off, to be quite honest. I was scared of being vulnerable, and, because there's courage in vulnerability, like you're putting yourself out there. Anyone can listen to it. It's like, whoa. And that's the beauty of it in a sense, because it's like it can reach anyone, but that can be the scary part of it too. And there's fear of failure. You kind of think, well, if I put all this together and I put myself out there and no one listens, and what does that mean? I must be a big fat failure. So I think the advice for that is, firstly, just to combat those fears. The first one is your warm market at the moment, probably because it's sales actually is probably a little bit different. But if you push that to the side for a second, your parents and your neighbor's cat probably aren't your ideal listener anyway, right?
What do you mean?
They're probably not your target market. They're probably not your ideal customer or client. No, they just know you. So it's great, that they can build your downloads, but, realistically, they may not purchase from you, or they might initially, but you'll exhaust that warm market eventually. And that's when you need to get to cold market more to build that successful business or to make all those sales and the quotas and whatnot. So that kind of blows it out the water, because it's like, cool, don't make the podcast for them. Yeah. Make it for your ideal listener and for yourself as well. right? So fear of judgment, you know, people that are further than you aren't going to sit back and criticize you because they know the guts and the intestinal fortitude it takes to put yourself out there.
Totally agree with that one. Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
The next one is failure. So the thing with that is like anything, right? You get, you know, where focus goes, energy flows. Tony talks about that, Tony Robbins, right? So if you're focusing,
right there.
Yeah, I've got it, got it with a t-shirt, gym shirt. Yeah, I love it. It's great. If you're focusing on being a failure, you're going to bring that about. You know, you're going to be having this negative self-talk going, no one's going to listen. So what's the point anyway? You know, I'm only going to give this a little go for like 2 months. And if there's no success, and I'm just going to give up, or, you know, say it's not for me or whatever. Do you know what I mean? So if you're focusing on that, you're not going to get very far. But if you're focusing on it being successful and attracting those sales and those customers and helping the world and, you know, living out your purpose and your passion and all that sort of jazz, you don't have time to be worrying about failing because that's not an option anymore. You're like, this is going to happen no matter what. I'm going to make it happen. You know, that determination. And it does take a bit of that, to be quite honest with everyone. Like, I could have given up at the very beginning. I had no listeners, right? I had 0 listeners when I first started. I had no following. I had no business. There was no guarantee that anyone would listen. My goal was just to help one person out there in the world somewhere. And it was like, okay, cool. I met that 2 people now. Do you know what I mean? It was really step by step. And set myself up that way. Because if I'm like, oh, I've got to make 5,000 downloads in 2 weeks, like, I'm setting myself up for failure because I've got no control over that really. I can only do my part and trust the universe or a higher source of power or whatever to bring those results to me, which is what you do. So I hope that kind of answers that question a little bit.
Absolutely love that. Yeah, gold. All right, so what's next for you?
Oh, that's such a good question. Oh, Dre, this is a really juicy question. So for me, I've only niched into this area in this industry probably the last 3 or 4 months, maybe 3 months. So I'm still starting out in this new niche, but my plan is I was doing one-to-one coaching. That was the majority of my business at the start of the year. I've completely restructured now, and I'm really passionate about group work and group coaching, which is why I love Podcast Launch Queens, because I get to help as many people as I can, you know, in that group rather than one by one at a time, which, you know, it's still great and beautiful. It's just I found that quite challenging. So my plan is to do Podcast Launch Queens and then have an even higher ticket, you know, program next year that helps existing podcasters to really get high profile people on their podcast, to grow it, to monetize it, you know, for those people that are already doing the legwork but are like, cool, what's next now? How do I get this thing bigger? You know, how do I get it out to more people? How do I get to 10,000 downloads, 20, you know, all that jazz. So that's my plan. And also, like, there's not a crap load of podcast coaches yet, as you might already know that, because it's not that common yet.
I only know 2.
There's not many of us. It'll grow though. You watch. I reckon there'll be heaps more. Like, you know, YouTube consultants and YouTube strategists and all that. It'll be like that too. But I'm going into more of like, I definitely am passionate about strategy and the technical stuff, but also like the mindset, the psychology, and also the spiritual side of it too. Because I truly do believe that podcasting is a spiritual practice. You know, you're putting your stuff out there, you're showing up, and it's left to the rest. The rest of it is left up to something else. Do you know what I mean? Like, I put myself out there. Law of attraction, you know, you'll attract the right people in, they'll listen to you, they'll build that connection with you, that know, like, and trust, and they'll actually want to purchase off you or just be around your energy and who you are, build friendships, all of that. So that's my big plan and goal. But ultimately, I guess it's to help empower as many people to have their voice and use it for positive global change, whether it be through sales, whether it be through something else, but mostly with just using podcasting as the platform of doing that.
You've delivered so much gold today. Oh, it was dropping the mic everywhere. All right, very last question.
Yes.
Is there anything that you'd like to leave on? Is there anything that you'd like to say to the audience, like anything at all?
I think, you know, some people have really quick results with podcasting. I wasn't really one of them. So I think a lot of people can talk themselves out of it before they really even reach the gold. And I've been there quite a few times where I'm like, oh, what's the point? I'll just give up. But, you know, once you kind of get that momentum, I think the most important thing is to enjoy it. Yeah. Like, if you don't enjoy what you do, you're just not going to stick to it. And so that's the first thing, right? Is really actually learning to enjoy the process. The other thing is, as you said, podcasting, like anything, whether you're a YouTuber, a podcaster, a social media creator, whatever, it takes time. So if you're busy like me, or you're getting to that point, definitely start outsourcing, because it's going to free up more of your time. So a lot of podcasters get into that loop of perfectionism, like, oh, no one's going to edit it as good as me, or no one else is going to do it right like I want it. Yeah, I went through that. I had to get over that, because I was like, this is taking me hours out of my week. Yeah, you know, and it's a big, I get it. It's like your baby. You want it to reflect and give you the right reputation for your business and all this and sales and whatnot. But there comes a point in time where you just, if you really think about it in terms of ROI, you can, you know, to edit a half an hour episode, it takes 3 times as long. So then you're spending an hour and a half of your precious time editing when someone else can do that for you on your behalf. And you could be focusing on generating more sales into your business by doing more episodes or Facebook Lives or whatever it is that you do, right? And as I said to you earlier, it can be lots of different price points. It doesn't have to be super expensive. It can be actually really, really cheap if you go to like Fiverr, Upwork, Airtasker. There's lots of different places online. But I guess it's just doing what you can do within your budget if you need to. Also think about your podcast as like a tax write-off or a business investment, you know, that sort of thing. I actually had a client at the start of the year who was a financial analyst, and she wanted to start a podcast, and through her role, they asked her to do some voiceover work, and she manifested like this microphone, all this podcasting equipment without paying $1. Do you know what I mean? So there's ways to do things. So if you're really determined, you'll make it happen.
Love that. Olivia Powell, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
That was awesome. Oh man, so much gold. Love that.
Oh, I'm glad. Yeah. I'm glad I could bring some.
Hey, super legends, superheroes, superstars. How bloody good was that? Olivia, thank you for bringing the fire. Mic drop. All right, everyone else, these are my main takeaways. So Olivia said to have an outstanding podcast, you need to have energy. You need to bring that energy, that enthusiasm, that zest. And you need to be relatable, but also you need to show your vulnerability. She also mentioned the 3 E's. Can you remember what those are? Let me start you off. So the first E was education. The second E was entertainment. If we put those 2 together, that's edutainment. I'm not making that up. That is an actual thing. You can Google it. And the last E is empowering your audience. So you want them to walk away empowered that what you've taught them, that they can go and implement into their life, into their business, or whatever that might be. She also mentioned audiograms as well, and how powerful they are. So that appeals to the visual people. So if you're sitting on the toilet, make sure that you've got the text going along, so people, if they're not able to listen, then they can just read the words as well. So I'm going to make sure that I do that. Initially there was supposed to be 8 ways that you can sell from your podcast. Olivia actually gave us 10. I definitely can't remember all 10 right now, and I won't be able to reel them off. So I'm going to give you my personal favourite, which is sponsorship. So that is something that I'm going to look for now with this show, and also my other show, Hot Hire. So if there is anyone out there that wants to sponsor, please let me know as well. The last thing that I'm going to leave you with is psychology. So Olivia said that when people have got a fear, it's all about the mindset. So it's 80% psychology and then 20% of the mechanics. So going through the process and just following the journey all the way through. So she even mentioned that it took her 6 months to pluck up the courage. And I know that that happens with a lot of people, so totally there. So that's a wrap for episode number 2. And guys, thank you. I really appreciate you. Thanks for tuning in. Please don't forget to like, comment, and share. And I will see you soon for episode number 3.